Hello.
Hi again. We've just seen Abram and Sarai make a misstep in their faith. They have gone ahead willfully, ahead of the plan of God. In effect, again, put God on schedule. You're going to fulfill your promise now. That seems to be the implication of this story. So when the Egyptian maidservant Hagar, by the plan of Sarai, becomes pregnant with Abram's offspring, hostility breaks out between the two women. That's pretty normal. And when she deals harshly with Hagar, Hagar flees. And then we pick up the story in chapter 16 of Genesis, verse 7.
Later, Jehovah's angel found her at a fountain of water in the wilderness, at the fountain on the way to Shur. And he began to say, Hagar, maidservant of Sarai, just where have you come from, and where are you going? To this she said, Why, from Sarai, my mistress, I am running away. And Jehovah's angel went on to say to her, Return to your mistress, and humble yourself under her hand. Then Jehovah's angel said to her, I shall greatly multiply your seed, so that it will not be numbered for multitude. Further, Jehovah's angel added to her, Here you are pregnant, and you shall give birth to a son, and must call his name Ishmael, for Jehovah has heard your affliction. As for him, he will become a zebra of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and the hand of everyone will be against him. And before the face of all his brothers he will tabernacle. Then she began to call the name of Jehovah, who was speaking to her. You are a God of sight. For she said, Have I here actually looked upon him who sees me? That is why the well was called Bir Lahai-roi. Here it is between Kadesh and Bered. Later on, Hagar bore to Abram a son, and Abram called the name of his son, whom Hagar bore, Ishmael. And Abram was 86 years old at Hagar's bearing Ishmael to Abram.
Well, before we actually get into the narrative, it's worthwhile to note here's another change of designation for, well, another title with the name of God in it. And in the last chapter we noted a new name for God, Adonai Yahweh,
Right.
Lord Jehovah. This one we have the Angel of Jehovah, or as the Watchtower Bible says, Jehovah's angel.
Yeah.
And we might not notice that either when we're witnesses. Well, what's happening here that suddenly we have an angel who is not called an angel, but the Angel of Jehovah? And we don't do the same things with that if we're Jehovah's Witnesses. The church has habitually done with it, and the synagogue before that.
Yeah, right.
The Angel of Jehovah, they noted over the centuries, was not just an angel, i.e. a created angel. There we have a comparison maybe with the use of the word Son of God in the New Testament especially. Although sons of God is used in the Old Testament, even of Egypt, or rather of Israel coming out of Egypt. Out of Egypt I called my son. So
Right.
it's used comparatively of the entire nation. But it's also used individually of angels apparently, as in Job, the sons of God assembled before him. Created angels therefore, but in the New Testament it's also used not only as for created sons but also for adopted sons. And Christians become children of God or sons of God by adoption in Christ. But it's also used in another sense in the New Testament, the only begotten Son of God, the only begotten Son of God,
So distinctions.
not of a created being,
Yeah.
but a begotten being, and a unique being. So in the same way that son is used in the New Testament and throughout the Bible, so also this phrase, the Angel of Jehovah, seems to be unique in its usage, because it infers more than just a created being. So in a way the Watchtower has anticipated that by just saying Jehovah's angel. What does that mean, Jehovah's angel?
But when she speaks, she seems to be saying, here she goes, have I here actually looked upon him who sees me? So she definitely sees something, and she thinks it's God.
Yeah.
You know, she's not assuming it's an angel.
No, although 4 times, right? 4 times consistently.
It says the
angel of the Lord, or Jehovah.
Yeah.
She thinks she's seeing God.
Right.
And if you look throughout the entire Old Testament where this phrase Angel of Jehovah occurs, that seems to be the common perception.
Yeah, that's the reaction of the person who meets
the
angel.
Am I going to live at all now that I've seen God?
Right.
So, to the story, God, first of all, chases after her. Yeah. Although Abram and Sarai have, as it were, cast her out by their severe treatment of her, God is still concerned with the promise.
Even though his promise, spiritual promise, is going to come through Sarah, he cares about all of Abraham's children. And he's already made promises in Genesis 12 to all his children, not just the favored one for spiritual.
Yeah.
But all his children, he says, will be blessed.
Which is saying something about Bible prophecy, and specifically about promises in general.
Yeah.
They're not all spiritual.
And they're not all, God doesn't guarantee promises to everyone the same promise. He differentiates. He gives some promises to, here, Hagar's child gets different promises than Sarah's child will get.
Despite his nature, because the angel of Jehovah tells Hagar what the nature of her child is going to be, his personality, as it were.
Yeah.
He's a wild ass of a man, a wild donkey of a man. The Watchtower somewhat softened it by saying zebra.
Yeah.
I don't know what the personality of a zebra is, but I do know what a wild ass and a wild donkey are like.
I don't know personally any, yes, but we're all acquainted with stubbornness and donkeys, and you know, is this the character of his descendants through Ishmael?
In case we miss if we miss the analogy, the animal analogy, he reiterates it by saying his hand will be against everyone, everybody's hand against him, and he shall dwell over against, the ESV says, over against all his kinsmen. How does the NIV render?
I think the NIV said hostility will be, you know, there will be hostility. In the New World it says, before the face of all his brothers he will tabernacle. But in the NIV it says there will be hostility between him and his brothers.
So the blessing upon Hagar's offspring, Abram's offspring, is not because of his personality or Hagar's personality and theology.
Yeah.
And even it's a promise to Abram that God gave unconditionally.
Yeah.
So I think here's where it gets really interesting for its fulfillment, because this is 4,000 years ago, and God is saying this is the future. And as you read through the rest of the Old Testament, you see its fulfillment over the generations and centuries after this, in that nations are created out of Ishmael that are hostile to Israel. They're brothers.
Yeah. And when you think of the story, I mean, it didn't have to happen. If they had not gone down to Egypt, they would never have gotten Hagar as a maidservant, and she wouldn't have been offered to Abraham or Abram. You know, so a lot of this missteps that happen, God works with our missteps. He doesn't just, not allow them. He actually lets you make those missteps, but he cares. Even in your missteps, he cares.
This will result in cursings and blessings to God's own seed, to Abram's own seed. There will be blessings for Ishmael's descendants because of Abraham. There'll also be curses for Abraham's descendants through Isaac, because these nations that are coming out of Ishmael, and nations coming out of Lot, we might add, from the prior misstep in chapter 13, these nations are going to be enemies of Israel, and finally are going to be in war with Israel. But there's something even more wonderful coming out of this, because the Bible itself doesn't cover this part of it, that in later generations, still 600 AD, these nations that came out of Ishmael are going to create a new religion. Islam. So Christian commentaries looking at this will make that this hostility that we see in this chapter is now played out for 4,000 years. Islam is a hybrid religion combining aspects of Judeo-Christianity, monotheism for instance, a belief in the prophets, with paganism. How could you guess that anything different could happen when you start with Abram and an Egyptian wife or an Egyptian mate?
And the curious thing is that both Sarai and Abram, at this point, when things don't work out in their human reasoning, they've planned all this out thinking it's God's fulfillment. I'll get a seed through her. Well, right now, both of them are willing to just disfellowship. There's not only Hagar, but their offspring, the very one that they think is the seed, they're willing to let go. But, that is something that should be meaningful to us as witnesses, in that even if your own parents will abandon you, God won't.
And there's enormous implications here for our relation with Islam too, because these people, the Arab people, claim descent from Ishmael, who after all is a son, the firstborn son. That's what part of their claim.
Yeah.
Ishmael is the firstborn son. He gets the rights. He gets the spiritual as well as the material blessings.
Yeah.
The Bible pretty consistently says no, not necessarily the firstborn according to the flesh.
Yeah.
But he does get blessings.
Yeah.
And those blessings go on to this day.
God promises blessings to those who bless Abraham's children.
Yeah. So the enormous implications for mission today and the attitude we should take toward Arab and Islamic people. The next segment go into the expansion of the promises in the covenant of circumcision and another appearance of Yahweh Jehovah.